What is that? Battlefield to the rescue.
Like, you want to get a newspaper? You want to
Happy book.
I'm a Holocaust survivor. Thank you. Yes. Which one of you can tell me what was the Holocaust? Anyone here knows what it means, what it was, what you're talking about, the word? Do you know the word? Do you understand what it meant? Well, to make it kind of easy to understand, there was a guy somewhere who decided that he was going to kill all the people that had yellow hair, let's say, or red hair, or, you know. He picked a group of people and he decided he was going to kill them all. To this day, I do not understand why he wanted to kill them. But I was very young, and my uncle said, I'm going to change your name. I'm going to give you a different name, and you are going to be Yanka Leshak, and you are now a Catholic. And I said, what is a Catholic? He said, well, you're not a Jew. What is a Jew? I had no idea. I had no idea what they were talking about. I had no idea that there were different religions. I had no idea that people worship different gods. I had no idea of any of that. I had not been raised. My father was a very learned man, and he believed that I should learn. Learning, he taught me to read when I was 3. And after that, he gave me books. And he said, the most important thing in the world, not beauty, not wealth, but knowledge. He said, knowledge is the most important thing.
Thank you, guys. I want to say hi to everybody. I grew up in the Northeast San Fernando Valley. I grew up in the city of San Fernando, and I graduated from San Fernando High School. So I am a tiger. I apologize for. But I am the publisher of the San Fernando Valley Sun. It's a newspaper, and a newspaper gathers news by paying journalists who know how to vet the news, who know how to gather it, and that's important because you know you can trust the news out of your community newspaper. And then we translate it into Spanish because a lot of people in our community like that. So recently, our paper was lucky enough to get a grant from the library, from the state of California Library, to bring to light the issue of hate and how it permeates, whether it's bullying, whether it's name calling, whether it's, you know, just names that we think, apodos that we think are okay, but maybe sometimes are a little bit hurtful. And sometimes it's okay when words don't hurt, but then they can become violent. And so how do we stop all that? And so one of the things that occurred in history, and I know you've probably studied about it, was the Holocaust in Europe. And it was about hating the other people that they didn't know anything about. And they just hated them for hate, and they killed millions and millions of Jews just because they hated them. It's called anti-Semitism. And you might be seeing in the news that there's a little bit of, you know, a lot of unrest and a lot of horrible things that are happening. So to bring this topic to mind, I wanted you to meet somebody who is a friend, and I consider her family, who survived that horrific time. She was 6 years old when she had to go into hiding with her cousin, her 5-year-old cousin, and she kept him alive. So I wanted you...
I wasn't hiding in a cellar. I pretended to be someone else, so I was hiding myself, my personality, but I didn't know why. I was like everybody else. I spoke like everybody else. I had parents who spoke like everybody else, and I did not understand what it meant. And somebody said, it's because you're Jewish. And I said, what is that? I had no idea what it was. I had no idea that there were different religions or that people were worshiping different gods. I had no idea that I had to hide. And all of a sudden, I had to be someone else. And I didn't understand why I had to be someone else. I was pretty much I liked myself the way I was. My daddy liked me a lot. So I thought, I don't understand. What I must tell you before I continue is that you have probably learned about the Second World War, which started on September 1st, 1939, when Germany invaded Poland, and I was living in Krakow in Poland. And my father, I laugh when I think of it, my father went to the train station taking me and my mother, and thought that he would send us to the mountains. There are beautiful mountains in Poland. And unfortunately, there were no trains going. But while he was at the train station, there was a horse and buggy outside, and it was sort of like a taxi. They were using horses and buggies for moving people around. And he walked up to the driver, and I don't know what he told him. I was very curious what he was doing, but he pulled money out of his pocket and he gave it to the man who had the reins of the horse. And he turned to me and he said, "Come on, get in." And my mother looked at him and said, "Are you insane? What are you going to do with this horse and buggy? We lived in a city. We didn't have space for a horse and buggy." Well, my father said to my mother a sentence that I've never forgotten, and it was a very important sentence. He said, "I bought this horse and buggy to go east." And my mother said, "East? You're going to go to Russia?" And my father said, "As far as I can to get away from Hitler." I thought to myself, who is this Hitler my father is afraid of? Now, I am 5 years old or 5.5 years old, and I think my daddy is like the greatest, and I don't understand why he's afraid of this Hitler. But we are in a horse and buggy, and we're going east. We stop to eat. Sometimes we stop to sleep, but not always. And we are going east. My dad did have family that lived in a city in eastern Poland. And we wound up moving to that area where the family lived. It took us a week or more. I think it was about 7 days, and all kinds of very strange things happened. But that wasn't the most important part. The most important part was that as we were moving east, we encountered a truck full of soldiers. And my father looked inside and he said, "These are Russians." My mother said, "Russians? What are the Russians doing here?" Well, apparently they didn't know that eastern Poland was invaded by Russian army. Western Poland was invaded by German army. And so I guess they must have had an agreement, because they weren't going to kill each other. They were just going to take Poland. I wound up living in eastern Poland, which was in Russian hands. My parents, my dad had I was just telling Martha that my father had 3 PhDs, 3 doctorates. One in economics. Anyway, he was sort of highly educated. And he taught me, or he told me, that the most important thing in the world is knowledge. Not money, not beauty, not all of that, he said, fades. It's here today and goes tomorrow. But what you have in your head is the most important thing. Knowledge is the most important thing. And so from the time I was a little girl, I wanted to know. And my father, as I said, taught me to read. And so I was able to get books and articles and read the paper. And yeah. One day when we were home, there was a knock on the door in the middle of the night. And they came, the Russians, and they took my parents away. And my father said to my aunt, he said, Regina, would you please put this child to bed? And she took me by the hand, my aunt, my father's sister, and she put me to bed. And I didn't understand why they said, my father said to put me to bed. But they were gone. They were gone. They were taken by the Russians. They were sent to Siberia, to a camp, a prisoner camp. I was living at the time with my aunt, my father's sister, and my uncle, my father's brother, and they were caring and loving to me. I had a cousin who was a year older than I, and so we were good friends, and I had someone that I could relate to. I didn't know why they took away my parents. I didn't know why my father told my aunt to put me to bed, but here I was. They were gone. They were in Siberia, in a labor camp, and I was still in Poland with my aunt and uncle. It wasn't very long that the Germans moved eastward, took that part of Poland that had been taken by the Russians, and were taking slowly Jewish people and sending them away. I didn't know where they were sending them away, but they were sending them away. And I didn't know. My uncle said to me, look, I'm going to get you some papers and your name will be changed and it's for your survival. And I said, what do you mean for my survival? And he said, you're not going to be Yona Kunstler. You're going to be Janka Leszak. Ah, may I have that? I do. Can you find?
Oh, we have this actually.
Yeah.
So can you get that on the
You can-
computer?
Yeah.
This is your paperwork.
Yeah, this is, we can disconnect it and send it down.
I think I have it right here. Yona?
Yeah.
It's right behind you.
Oh, it is? Oh,
Right there.
okay.
See, right there.
Oh, yeah,
That's your paperwork.
I took this.
Oh.
Show them. Anyway, it's there, but if you want to see it bigger. Uh-huh. So, my uncle said, this is my uncle. This is a photograph of my uncle. He was the one who made the paper for me. And I was no longer the person that I had on my birth certificate. I became Janka Leszak. And I was Catholic. And at that point, I had absolutely no idea what was a Jew, a Catholic, a Protestant, anything. I had no understanding that there were different religions and that people worshiped different gods. No idea. I didn't worship anybody. I didn't know about God. I was too young. Nobody had ever told me that I needed to know God or pray to God or anything like that. But here now, all of a sudden, this is my new birth certificate. And I brought this with me because the Pope sent me this. And I will send it down if you want to move it to show you. So my uncle told me that my name was changed, that I was now Janka Leszak, and that I'm going to go to church. And I said, okay. And since my father had taught me to read, I was able to understand some of the things that I needed to do when I went to church. I had never been taught any other religion. I had never been told that I was a different religion or that I worshipped a different God, but I never worshipped anybody or anything, so it wasn't difficult. My name was changed, and that was my new birth certificate. And when I was sent to church, I loved it because there was music, the priest was wonderful, he was teaching, he was telling us things, and I was able to read everything that I had in front of me. And since I was able to read and half of the other kids were not, well, the priest liked me, and he thought I was pretty good because when he gave us new things to read, I was able to read it pretty quickly. He asked me if I would read to the class, to the group of kids that were there. And I loved going to church. I loved going to church. I loved the atmosphere. I loved what the priest said. I loved the prayers. I loved the, I'm trying to think what it's called, incense, the incense, yeah, the incense. And I had never been to another place where people worshiped. I had never been to when somebody said I was a Jew, I had no idea what it meant. I had never heard the word before. Nobody had taught me, you're this and he's that and somebody else is something else. So I went to church and I loved it. And the priest liked me because I was able to read and, I was able to help him with the kids who were farmers' children and did not know how to read. So I had a very special place and I really liked it. When the war ended, my father and mother were lucky enough to have survived the Second World War. They had been deported to Russia. My uncle, the one who sent me to the village to live with this new family, he did not survive. He died in Auschwitz. But he saved my life. Mine and my brother Gabby was my first cousin. He was a year younger than I. And I was made responsible for him. My uncle said, you have to watch, you have to make sure Gabby doesn't expose himself. And I said, expose himself? What does that mean? He said, well, he doesn't pee in front of anybody. And I said, why? Why shouldn't he pee in front of anybody? I mean, if he goes to pee with the boys, what, you know? No, 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 he doesn't go pee with the boys. Why not? Because he's circumcised. When you're born, your penis has a skin that covers it. And it's called a foreskin. And it used to be that Jewish little boys had that skin removed when they were very little. I mean, when they were a few weeks old. And apparently, the reason why you were circumcised when you were born a few days or a few weeks old is because it was for health reasons. That little foreskin was causing infections and whatever. The point was that up until that time, when everybody figured it out, that it was for health reasons, and you know, they circumcise boys now in Europe and in America, and everybody, not just Jewish children. Only Jewish children were circumcised. The people that found out that men were circumcised and they did not have that little skin covering their penises, they were dead. The Germans killed them. That was a way for them to identify who was Jewish and who was not. And so it was an easy task. And most of those men who had been identified by, you know, looking at their penises, that they had been circumcised, were dead. They were killed by foster parents. The father was a retired professor of Latin and Greek. That family that I lived with, they were highly educated. They were not peasants, they were not farmers. They did have land, and we were planting things all the time in the spring and picking them from the ground. And because he was an educated man, my foster father, we always had visitors. Who were the visitors? The Nazis. We used to have constant visitors. The Nazis used to come and visit Herr Professor. Oh, the Nazis, yes. You see, my father and my mother were educated in Vienna, and they both spoke fluent German. And so that I would not understand, they spoke German between them. What my father did not know was that I had inherited his talent for languages. And while they were talking German between them, within a certain period of time, I don't know how long it took me, but I was able to understand what they were saying. And so when the Germans came to visit Herr Professor, because he was an important old man, they would speak German. And I would be the only one who knew what they were saying. And I could tell everybody on the farm, I could tell all my friends who worked on the farm what they said. And so, oh boy, I had a very special place amongst all the guys and all the girls because I understood what the Germans were talking about. And whenever there was anything that was said that seemed to me like it was dangerous, immediately they knew. Oh, thank you. Yeah, you saw the birth certificate?
Oh, yeah.
Anyway, to finish the story, the Germans came and went. Gabi and I survived. The Russians came after the Germans, and I was able to speak a little bit of Russian, which I had learned when I was in Tarnopol before, when the Russians were there, and I learned a little bit of Russian. So when they came and I spoke Russian to them, it was January 17, 1945, was the day that I was liberated by the Russian army. And I was able to say some words to them in Russian. And the general sat me on his lap, and he said he was so happy that I welcomed him in his language. Time went on. The Germans took all our food as they were leaving, going west to Germany. They ate everything we had on the farm. Everything that was edible, they ate. When the Russians came, there was hardly anything left. And they used to take my chickens that were mine. I used to take care of them. I loved the chickens. And they used to take the chickens, and they had these big, giant boiling things that, came with the army. And they would take my chicken and turn their head off like that, and then drop them into the boiler with the feathers. And the feathers came off in the boiling water. And I guess they pulled them out and threw them away from their soup. But the chicken they were able to peel off. And they were my chickens because I fed them. And I used to go and I used to look in the straw and look for where they laid their eggs, and I would find the eggs because we didn't have them locked up. They were walking around free. The Germans ate some of our chickens and the Russians ate the rest. And I cried because they were my chickens. They were my... I was going to say, it's like when you have a kitten and it's your kitten. Now I have a cat that comes into my bed every day, lies on top of my chest. And my chickens were like that. They used to know when I came to feed them and let them out into the world, out into the, walking around. Anyway, the Germans left, the Russians came, and then they left. And then things got kind of normal. We were living in Poland, and we had a Polish government, and the priest used to say, "Janka, what do you think you're going to do?" And I said, "I don't know. I'm hoping that maybe I will be able to go to school." Because by then I was probably 10, and I had never gone to school. I knew how to read, but I did not know how to write, because I had never learned. My daddy taught me how to read, but he never taught me how to write. And so I was wondering, am I going to go to school? Am I going to sit in a classroom in a chair with other children? I sort of fantasized what was going to happen to me. And I thought, maybe I'll be able to do that. And then one day, I was out in the fields picking something, and I saw on the kind of a raised area, which was where the house stood, that there was a group of people standing there, and they were calling me. They were calling me, "Janka, Janka, Janka." And I wondered why they were calling me. And I thought, well, I guess I better go. So I moved from the fields. I think I was picking strawberries in the strawberry field. And I was walking up, and here was this group of people. And one man had white hair, and this man was standing there, and they called me. And they said, "Janka, Janka." And I walk up there, and this man is looking at me. And they say, everybody, all the family was gathered. And they said, "Do you know who this is?" And I looked at this man, and he had white hair. And he didn't look like someone I knew, but all of a sudden, I realized that I knew him. And I said, it's my daddy. And when I said that, my father started crying. And I thought that I had lost my parents. I thought that they were dead. And now I found out that my daddy and my mommy were alive. And I wondered what was going to happen. And I said, I can sleep on the floor if you don't have a bed. You don't have to feed me. I can figure out my food. I can go to the fields and I can find food. So you don't have to worry about feeding me. And my father was crying and he said, no, I can feed you, not to worry, you're coming with me. When we went up to Gabby, my brother, who was really my cousin, that's Gabby, my brother. And we said, come on, get dressed. And my foster parents said, oh, I'm terribly sorry, Dr. Kunstler, to my father. They said, terribly sorry, Dr. Kunstler, but we cannot let Gabby go with you because his father said that he will come to get him. And you are not his father. This is Gabby's father. And you're not his father. And my father knew that my uncle had been killed in Auschwitz, but he could not convince. So he took me, and Gabby stayed with the foster parents. My father was a lawyer, by the way, so he was doing things automatically. And he found the witnesses who had seen Gabby's father be killed in Auschwitz, took them to court, and they swore, however you do that, in a legal manner. And so he had legal documents that proved that Gabby's father died in Auschwitz and that my father was now his only relative. My father went to court and got papers, and we went back to get Gabby. And that's how I survived the war. And my parents, I was lucky that my parents came back, and I recognized my father because we were separated for 5 years, which was almost half of my life. And after that, we lived in Poland for a little while, and then my father had lived in Russia, and he realized that the Russians were trying to put Poland into a communist state and that we wouldn't be able to leave. And so he said, we need to leave shortly. So a few months after I reconnected with my parents, we had to leave Poland on foot with a group of kids during the night. And we left Poland and we walked out and we wound up in Germany in the American zone. And that's when I learned to eat Weber's bread because they didn't have the kind of bread that we had on the farm, which was dark and crusty. And the American army that was running the camps, they had Weber's bread, and we didn't know that such a bread was edible, but we did eat it. And we were in the American zone, and the one thing that was funny that I will tell you about was that I wanted to ride a bicycle. And the men who were coming to work in the camp from the village, German guys, would come on bicycle. And I wanted to learn to ride a bicycle, and I wanted to ride a bicycle. So I asked one of them, can I borrow your bicycle? And he said, yeah, I'll let you have my bicycle if you get me 2 Camel cigarettes. What is that? So he showed me. He was smoking one. This German guy who came to work with his bicycle. I said, where do you get Camel cigarettes? He said, from the Americans who are, the Americans who are they were running the camp. They were the power, And I said, really? And they're called Camel cigarettes. So I said, I want that bicycle, and I'm going to go and I'm going to get 2 cigarettes. So I walked up to 2 American soldiers and I said, please, 2 cigarettes? And they looked at me and they said, you're too young to smoke. I said, no, me bicycle from him. And I pointed and I said, he has bicycle. He want 2 American cigarettes. Oh, the guy said, all right, little girl. He takes out two Camel cigarettes, gives them to me. I run over to the guy whom I saw come to work on his bicycle, and I said, here, 2 cigarettes. Okay, give me the bicycle. So now I had a bicycle. All the guys who were older than me, they said, how'd you get that bicycle? And I said, 2 American Camels. So I figured out how to get the bicycle. I had to use my brain to get things done. And we had a wonderful time under the Americans. They fed us very well. We had good food, and then I could have my bicycle. And eventually, my parents were able to get out of Poland and came and picked me up and Gabi, and we went to Paris. And that's where I spent the second part of my life. That's where I went to school for the first time. That's when I sat in a chair in a school, and there was a blackboard facing me. And I lived in Germany for a while, so I had to speak German, but my parents spoke German at home, so I had picked it up, so it was easy. Now I had to learn a new language. Now I had to learn French. And it took me a little bit, not very long, and that's where I was able to go to school for the first time in my life. That's where I graduated from school, and I was able to go to university. And when I came to America, I had to learn another language again. And here it was, and it was English. I had not learned English, but I figured out that it had a certain amount of significant, I'm trying to think of the word and it's not coming, but anyway, that it had a basic German, and when I went to France, I had to figure out that it was like Latin, and I had studied Latin when I was a very little girl on the farm, because my foster father was a professor of Latin and Greek, and so he taught me some Latin. And
Yona también habla español. Ella aprendió español aquí en Los Ángeles, ¿no?
Yes, sí. ¿Alguien aquí habla español? ¿Quién habla español? ¿Ustedes? Si quieren ustedes, yo les puedo contar la historia en español. También, en francés, en español, en alemán, cualquier. idioma ustedes quieren, yo les puedo contar la misma historia. Porque tuve que aprender inglés cuando vine a los Estados Unidos. Tuve que aprender francés cuando llegué a Francia. No sabía francés, solamente polaco. Y cuando aquí me di cuenta que mucha gente, la primera lengua era español. Entonces aprendí. Ahora ni me pueden vender ni me pueden comprar en español. Sí. Anybody has questions? Yes.
Did your parents ever explain to you how your uncle died?
I'm sorry. Speak up.
Did your parents ever explain to you how your uncle died?
Did my parents ever?
Explain how your uncle died.
My parents didn't know. My parents were in Russia. They came back, they didn't know about these things. I found out from someone, although my father did look and found out from someone how my uncle died. Yes, yes. There were very few people that survived, and I am one of the few as a child. Anybody has other questions? Yes. Anybody?
Come on, don't be
Yes.
shy.
Have you met any other Holocaust survivors?
You have to.
Have you met any other Holocaust survivors?
Oh yes, I have, because first of all in the DP camp in Germany right after the war, there were survivors, and I met them. And here there is the Holocaust Museum. There are survivors that come there also. I've met in circumstances, different circumstances. But yes.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
You said that.
Speak up because I can't hear you very well.
Okay, so since you're 5, 6 years old when you went to Holocaust, what was your earliest
You have to translate for me.
What's your earliest memory of having gone through the Holocaust?
No, kind of she said that she was 6.
Yes.
5 years old when she was in the Holocaust. What was her earliest memory kind of before that?
Oh, do you have any other earlier memories before 5 when you were with your parents?
Yes, I do. I like to build things, and I told my father to buy me things that you could build with, and my father bought me toys that you could put together. I remember we built a castle with all kinds of parts, and it was very, it was challenging, but I loved it. Yes, I've always liked to put things together, and yeah, I built a castle when I was very young. Yeah. Anybody else? Yes? Yes. You have to speak up because.
How did you feel after seeing your parents being taken away?
Can you hear it?
How did you feel when you saw your parents being taken away?
I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe it. I couldn't understand it. I was 6 years old. What were they doing? Why were they taking them away? And I was supposed to go with them, but my father said, "Would you please put her to bed?" So my aunt put me to bed, but otherwise I would have been with them. And both my parents survived. I mean, they were the only adult family members. Gabby and I were the other two that survived from my whole family, from the grandparents, the uncles, the aunts on both sides of my family, my father's side and my mother's side. And so Gabby and I were the only survivors after the war. There were some, distant cousins that came out that I didn't know. I was a child, I didn't know them, but they also survived. But not anyone from my immediate family.
There was a
Yes.
question over here.
Yes.
Hello, Yona. Before I ask my question, I just want to say it's good to see you again. I actually read your memoir 5 years ago for a class at UCLA. I don't remember coming to UCLA 5 years ago.
Do I remember
Yes.
So he was
speaking
at
at
UCLA.
UCLA?
Yes.
Yeah, I do remember.
I was there.
You were there?
Yeah, that was for a class, German 39. My professor, Professor Fu, and
Oh.
yeah, so it's funny how we just fake
Oh.
happens to.
So you
place.
recognize me?
Yes, I recognized the book, and I was like, wait, I read this before.
Oh, you did read my book?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't tell.
Oh, there's another question, Yona. Let's get
Where is it?
Becky, you know? Did somebody?
Who
Did you
has
see somebody? But did you have a question?
Yes.
Sorry.
I have one here in the.
Yeah, we have some too.
Oh,
We brought some.
okay.
Yes.
Anyway,
So-
oh yeah, you have the book. I've written a book and it's available on Amazon. So you,
Well, we have some for them.
oh, you have some.
We
Oh,
can either give it to the
wonderful.
teacher
Oh,
or to
great.
them if they want it. Yes.
That's great.
Okay.
So,
Sorry.
did you ever return back to your original home post World War II, during maybe the Soviet time or post Soviet time?
Did you ever go back to your original home after the war?
Yes.
And how did it change?
How did it change? How was
Oh.
it different?
Well, I was living in Paris, and I was probably an adult by the time I went back, and I had property in Poland. I had a building, so I had to hire lawyers and do things like that. And actually, I met a woman who was a professor of law at the Jagiellonian University, and she was the daughter of a friend of my father's, and we became very close friends, and I invited her to come to California, and she's a professor. She teaches law, is a professor. So she came and stayed with me for 6 months when it was a very bad time in Poland at the time. It was like very under Russian, and so yeah, I've gone back to Poland because, as I said, I have property there, and as the governments changed, I was able to get it.
Thank you.
Did you get it back?
Yeah.
You had to fight to
I mean,
get it
they
back?
were never. It was never anybody else's but mine. But
Okay.
when the government was not, when the government was not, when they were under communist
Yes.
influence, private property was not, recognized. And so when the government changed, I was able to recover. Yeah, I had a building there.
Any other questions? Yes, ma'am.
Yes?
How was your mother when she came back from all of this?
How was my brother?
Your mother.
Your mother.
Your mother was, I guess you're trying to, did she change? Is that what
Yeah.
you're saying? How was she after that experience she had? How was your mother?
She was very depressed. She had lost her hearing, and she was not multilingual like my dad. He became the representative eventually. He became the representative of the Polish government in exile. The Polish government in exile was in London, like the French government, like de Gaulle was there also. And my dad became the representative of the Polish government that was in London, not in Poland. And he was helping people because he was fluent in Russian and fluent in, And so he kind of became like a helping hand for a lot of people.
And what about your mom?
Huh?
What happened to your mom eventually?
My mom, they wound up living in Kazakhstan. So there was a whole new kind of something that she had never come in contact with. And it was she was learning things from the people, They were not Russian, they were Kazakhstani. And
If your teacher's
Yes.
here, go ahead.
So when you were doing the whole Holocaust, you're thinking that, like,
say again, because I couldn't hear you.
do you ever picture having a life instead of like Like, you ever picture yourself surviving the whole Holocaust and having been,
Did I imagine myself having a different life?
No, like, did you see yourself like kind of like surviving the whole thing and managing to live, managing to like live?
Well, you know,
Like,
it's kind of different putting yourself in a, you know, I've been in so many different places that I don't seek imagining. I imagine myself.
Like, did you see a future, like, you know, see yourself having a future?
Did I see myself having a future? Yes. Yes. In all different kinds of possibilities. You know, in different languages, in different countries, yes.
So, how many languages do you know in total?
Fluently, I speak 5. But I do have some other ones that I'm not fluent in, but, you know, if you dropped me in there, you couldn't sell me or you couldn't buy me, because I would figure it out.
Yes, ma'am.
Anybody else? Questions? Yes.
Do you remember a time when you almost exposed yourself?
When you almost exposed yourself for being Jewish, right? Is that what you're saying?
Did you?
You know what? I forgot this whole thing about being Jewish. I did not understand why it was important to make yourself different. I figured out that all of us have the same idea of religion, that we should be good, we should be caring, we should share, we should take care of the people who need help. And so what difference does it make if you're Jewish or Catholic or Protestant or something else? It's all the same. I figured out that it's all the same. It's just that there is a different figure, you know, that you venerate. But if you don't venerate the figure and you just accept the idea of being a good human being, of being a caring human being, I taught my children that if somebody needs to cross the street and they can't, you help them. And one day when my son was, I think, 8 or something like that, there was a woman, an elderly woman with a cane, who couldn't get down from the curb. And Ari walked up to her and helped her to get down from the curb. And I thought, I did it. I taught him to be a kind person who gives and helps and cares. And I told them, if they see someone is hungry, they are to share. They are to break their bread in half and give it to the other person. And so when Ari did that, I was very proud of myself because I knew he got it. That's what it's about. Whether you're a Jew or a Catholic or a Protestant or a Sikh or whatever, it's all the same. It's all the same. We're all human beings.
Who had a question over here?
Anybody else?
There was a hand over here.
Oh. Yes.
Did you ever hear about your cousin again?
Who?
Your cousin.
Oh, Gabby? Oh, he grew up with me. Yeah, that's when my father found us. Gabby, when we lived in Paris, I went to art school. We went, we moved to Paris, and that was the first time I went to school. That was the first time I sat in a chair and saw a blackboard. Yeah. Gabby and I went to school in Paris, in France, and Gabby continued, and he became a doctor, and he was a doctor in Paris, and he married a French girl, and they have French children, and my nephew and my niece are coming from Paris to visit. Yes. And they have children now. They're married and have children now. No. My brother is not alive anymore. He passed away. Yeah. He's a year younger than I, but
There's a young man back here who raises
Yes.
his hand.
Can you speak Russian?
Do you speak Russian?
немножко. You can't buy me or sell me in Russia.
Yeah, she does, absolutely. Okay, you have any more questions? Because you know what?
Sorry, here's Gabby.
Oh, there's one more. Yona, this young
Yes,
lady has a
there is
question
one
for you.
more. Yes.
During during being 5 years apart from your family, from your mom and your dad, did they ever tell you about their experience?
Did they tell you what happened when they were away from you for 5 years? Your parents, did they ever share
Yes.
what happened?
Yes, yes.
I think they
did.
want to know what happened
Yes,
to your
yes.
parents.
Well, my dad became the representative of the Polish government in Russia. And he was like a consul or a whatever, I don't know what they called him. But he was fluent in Russian and in Polish, and he was a lawyer, so he had the ability to have legal, then the Polish government made him into something that was helping the people. And I told you the story. Yeah.
So I think because her dad was, had all these kind of abilities, he was able to survive because they found a place for him to be helpful. So that was part of it. And that's what
What about her mom?
her mom was with him the whole time.
Yeah, my mom was with him, but she was not, she was a mama. She cooked and she raised Gabby and me, and she sewed, but she sewed and she knitted and she cooked. Yeah, she was a very good cook. So we had good food.
Anybody else have any questions?
Any
Yona
other
had
questions?
lived
Yes.
a history. Here you go.
Oh,
Do you now practice any Jewish traditions?
do I practice Jewish religion?
Traditions and religion.
Traditions, yes, yes. Like we celebrate
Rosh Hashanah.
Passover, and I buy matzah, and all of these things that were part of the tradition of Jewish, But I'm not. I believe in whatever higher, whatever there is. I guess it's for all of us, and I pleaded with my children to be kind and good people, and to do good in the world, and to. I'm thinking about. I was telling about what I was telling you about. I was in Germany, and I was sent to buy something, and the man who was selling it, he was one of these little merchants who had everything around him. He had salami, and he had things you couldn't find, you couldn't buy. He figured it out. So I was sent by my group in my room, my roommates, to pick up something that they had ordered. And I went and I picked it up, and the man said to me, "And what's your name, little girl?" I said, "My name is Yona Kunstler." He looked at me. He said, "You are Yona Kunstler?" I said, "Yes." He said, "Oh my God." And he took bags, and we were in a camp, right? And in an American camp, but American. And there were things we didn't have in the camp, but they had them out there somewhere. And he started filling bags with goodies, salami and whatever. I can't think of all the things that he was And I looked at it and I thought, I don't have any money. I can't pay for that. He said, your father saved my life. He said, all of this is for you. I will never be able to pay him back for what he did. But he always talked about you. He said that he was hoping when he got back from Russia that you would be alive. And when you said your name was Yona Kunstler, he said, I couldn't believe it because your father saved my life in prison in Russia. And he filled my bags with all the goodies that I could never have been able to afford. When I came back to my room, my roommates looked and said, what did you do? And I said, I didn't do anything. I just told him my name was Yona Kunstler. And I said, I didn't have any money. He just gave it to me. He said, my father saved his life. And so that's what I said to my children. You give forward what your grandfather did like that. Be kind to people. When they need something, you give it to them if you have it and they don't. And so that's my I'm trying to find the word. My word forward for all of you. Be good. Do good things. Yes. When you can do something that's good, take advantage and do it. Anybody has any questions? Nobody.
Oh, wait, one more.
Oh, yes.
Did you ever want to go back to your original name?
My original name?
Did you ever want to change it back, or?
Of course I did.
Her name is Yona.
My name is Yona, and my maiden name was Kunstler. And when my parents came back, when the war was over, I was back to my original name. Yes. Yes.
You know, there's some similarities there. I don't know if some of you have relatives
Yes.
Did you
that have.
ever keep something?
I'm sorry?
Did you ever keep something with you? Like,
Did I ever?
keep something? Like a rock,
I didn't have anything. I didn't have anything to keep. Did I ever keep anything? I'm trying to think. No, because I didn't have anything really. You know, I didn't have anything. Nothing that you could really. Whatever I had were things that I made out of pits. And things that were like hard, or things that I crocheted or knitted, but not any valuables. No. Yes.
Well, we brought you folks some refreshments and some goodies, and Yona's going to be here for a little bit if you want to maybe ask her some questions. We do have books. We're a little bit short, but we will make sure we get everybody a book, so all of you can have a book. I don't know if Yona's up for autographing anything, but while she's
Have
here.
anything? Oh, God.